Hello, everyone. I'm coming to you from Ohio in the US, and I'm so honored to be a part of this and to meet these incredible people and to work with these people. They are amazing, and what they're doing is changing the lives of so many people, and I'm so proud to be a part of that. So thank you for letting me be here.
We need to stop telling these lies to boys and men, no matter what they were wearing, look like, characteristics, body type, sexual orientation, or what they identify as. We need to stop victim blaming and just listen. Be that person in their lives that finally show them respect, kindness, dignity, love, and support.
As an 15-year-old Olympic-bound athlete, I was sexually abused by the adults that were entrusted in my training. And there were three different types of individuals. There was the professionals, the coach, and my parents. I had just taken 8th at the Junior Olympics in Lincoln, Nebraska, and they ran the story in the newspaper. And the lawyer read about it, and then he contacted my mother. And they started to meet over several months to talk about how the lawyer and his professional friends could help me pursue my Olympic dreams. The lawyer convinced my mother that he and his friends would provide funding for my training and travel, and also provide the family with assistance. Once he convinced my mother that this was the best offer, he insisted that she would help me by preparing me and have me ready whenever the professionals wanted to see me. He basically convinced my mother that the professionals would take me to dinners, parties, movies, events, and then in return, they would help the family with doctor's appointment, eye exams, medicines, etc. And my mother agreed. And then I had private dinners with the lawyers over several weeks, and he built on the dream of me wanting to become an Olympian and going to college. And he told me that I had to focus on getting good grades, being the best athlete I could be, and not to disappoint any other professionals. I grew to trust him and believed that he was a friend. The lawyer then began to take me to places to meet the other professionals, such as other lawyers and doctors and business owners. And I remember him telling me that these professionals were part of a secret men's group. And only those who wanted to help boys like me were permitted to join. And this process was a long process. And only the most trustworthy and prominent professionals were granted memberships. This tightly knit group of men protected each other and the boys that they helped. I was taken to the city to meet a doctor on several occasions, and at his mansion, which was known as the Ranch, and left for a week or the weekend. During these stays, the doctor would host parties for other professionals, and there were always about 4 or 5 young men, college student age, that were always there, and me. I think I was the only high school student at the time invited to these parties. And we were called the ponies. You were a pony if you were a novice, and then you were a colt if you'd been around for a little while. We were instructed to wear certain outfits that the doctor provided, and I always had to wear a white Speedo for some reason. We would line up in a row as the guests arrived, and they would look us over, and they would ask questions, interview us basically, and then they would be ushered to the back room or to the porch or some other part of the house, and they would place their bids. We were the object of a silent auction. After the bidding was closed, the top bidders would collect their boy prize, and they would spend the rest of the evening together. The boy that earned the highest bid got extra gifts from the doctors and some of the other professionals, such as money, watches, necklaces, clothes, etc. But every boy would have their tuition, books, meals, and sporting expenses taken care of. We would go on trips. Like whenever football game there was, wherever it was, if we ever got to go to the football bowl, we would go as a group. We went to New York, to LA, Europe, Miami for spring break, and New Year's Eve gala at the Hyatt Regency. While all this was happening, the coach started grooming me to win his trust. He insisted that he knew what was going on and with the professionals, and he understood my situation, and he was the only person that I could talk to that would understand. He made me feel really special, and he was sympathetic, and he felt for me. He cared for me. He protected me. These were thoughts that I built up in my head about him. And he also shared that he never felt like this way towards someone, especially a male, since he was male, and that we had to keep it a secret because nobody would understand. And it would end everything. And nobody would ever want to work with me again if the truth ever came out. So once the coach was assured that I would not tell, and he had my trust, is when he started to take me to overnight trips to practice with the college team. And it was during these times that the sexual abuse started to happen. But the whole time, I thought the coach and I were an item. We were in a relationship. So I was confused. I had shame, embarrassment. Each week I was being passed to a new professional and enduring the abuse. And then while seeing the coach at practice every day, it created a whole bunch of confusion. I started questioning my orientation, my sexual orientation, who I was. How can I keep this a secret? So that's the story. Grooming and coercion are aspects that take time. For me, it was not a quick process. However, this is not always the case. Many people I have spoken with were rushed through the process and quickly forced into the trafficking situation. I know some people who were trafficked because they had run away when they were young and they were trying to live off the streets. But they were still groomed to trust the people that said that they would help them. But grooming and trafficking are not always the same and are conducted differently depending on the social and economic status. In my case, the professionals had all the money they needed, so they groomed slowly and yet still got the same end result. So it's different for each person. The people that I was constantly around were the abusers. Except maybe my other teammates, but if you think about it, the only other people that may have had a frontline view of who I was would have been my teachers. Because other than going to school, I was in the pool practicing. So I would be with the coach. And then after that, I would be going to these dinners with the professionals. And then if I wasn't at the dinners with the professionals, I was at home with my parents. So all the three, the trifecta there, had already created this world of silence for me. But however, I will say that some of the indicators that I did do, and I was trying to get my parents' attention. I really was. And I think every child who's being abused wants it to be shared and wants to be heard and wants to be believed. Those are the things that are important. In my case, I always was immaculately dressed. I always had to have everything looking pristine. If there was some kind of speck of dirt on it, I changed clothes. That's the way I was. I always was from a little kid. Once the abuse started to happen, I started wearing the same clothes the whole week. But no one seemed to notice. Not even the teachers or my friends at school noticed. I don't know why. But and that was one of the things. And I also did not take showers. I was kind of a kid that would take 2 showers a day, but I just decided not to. And I think my parents kind of assumed that it must be one of those teenage things that he's going through. And he's always in the pool, so he doesn't need to shower all the time. But I was a kid that had to get the chlorine off of me. It just made me crazy. So that, and then the third thing that I really distinctly remember is I was the type of kid that would never cuss. It just wasn't part of me. And if I did, everybody laughed because it just didn't fit my personality. So I started to drop the F-bomb as loud as I could. And I thought that this would get someone's attention, but it didn't. No one noticed. No one asked. And I was begging for someone to ask me because I was not going to give information out easily. I was not going to share because I already tried that with my mother and it didn't work. So nobody was going to believe me. But if I could create some kind of indicator, if somebody would ask me what was wrong, then I would be invited to share what was happening. It never happened. Even at the church, when we would go to church, no one asked me. Even if I was wearing the same clothes that I wore last weekend, nobody asked. So this really left me feeling alone and abandoned, that I was by myself constantly, and that nobody was interested enough to find out what was going on with me, especially my parents. As a teenager, being trafficked by a group of professionals, which consisted of a judge, lawyers, and other law enforcement and medical personnel, my ability to report almost diminished to impossible. This group of professionals rallied and protected each other. I remember one boy who wrecked one of the Mercedes, and there was drugs found in the car with him. And the case was settled out of court. And there was a huge donation given to the police department made by the professionals. Another time, one of the boys tried to make a report, and of course, it never saw the light of day. And he was removed from our group and from the school, and we never knew what happened to him. So my perceptions of trying to reach out to the law enforcement for help or making a report was riddled with fear. I didn't know who to trust. My second time I encountered the law enforcement was when I was abused by a grad student and left in the wooded area on campus. The nurse at the medical center made me feel like it was my fault and that I must have wanted it, asking me questions like, why were you there in the first place? Why did you allow this to happen? And why didn't you fight back? Even after they had proof that I had been drugged and was not able to defend myself. I felt like they were more worried about the time it was going to take to fill out the paperwork. And then the humiliation and embarrassment and re-victimization of going through the rape kit was so overwhelming. I had a hard time trying to justify and differentiate between what the abuser was touching me and how the medical team was touching me and why it was okay for one and not the other. And then I felt that they lied to me when I asked them not to contact the police. I felt like I was ignored and unheard and betrayed. And then talking with the police was another harrowing experience. Having to retell the details over and over and over again, and the feeling that they were more interested in discovering loopholes in my story so that they could discredit the whole story than helping me. When I finally got the courage up to file my case against Dr. Strauss in the Ohio State University, I was not prepared for what I was going to face, endure, and constantly having to rehash the details with lawyers. Every time the case was closed and then opened again, I had to go back and re-answer all the questions over and over and over again. This has been going on for over 3 years now. I find that I feel like I'm being tested to see if my story has changed or altered in any way, or if I have forgotten any details. And this has caused such anxiety and stress because I'm constantly wondering, what did I say? How did I say it? How did I say it is a big one because if you say it one way and then you say it again, then they can show that it was not legit. So it's constantly watching my P's and Q's and making sure that everything is in order. And it's exhausting. I have been told many times that to make such an accusation can ruin a person's self-esteem, their reputation, and their life. But what about the survivors? Self-esteem, reputation, and life. What about the long-term effects of sexual abuse, such as PTSD, anxiety, depression, suicide, and etc.? And how this affects our relationships, our jobs, and how we contribute back to society. We have seen so many cases played out on the public stage where the survivor can't remember all the details because they were a teenager at the time of the abuse, and it has been many years ago. And so they are discredited and projected as fabricators. And yet at the same time, the abuser doesn't have to remember all the details. And the case is dismissed. And the abuser is apologized to and released. I feel like this process is putting the survivor on trial. And I feel like we need to re-examine the process so that we're able to hear and believe both sides on an equal basis. This is one of the reasons why many males do not report, because of the fear of societal norms and beliefs and the ridicule we face. We need to make changes.
So we will begin with John Michael answering our first question. So what are some advices that you would give male survivors or victims who have been struggling to overcome their trauma?
Well, first of all, I think that as a male survivor, I think the thing that really started to help me was to question those moments of outbursts of anger or uncontrollable rage that doesn't seem to fit in the situation. And then going back and trying to understand where they came from. And then that was what started to open it up for me, was to be able to realize this is not normal for me. Why am I acting this way? And then I think another thing is if you have any nightmares, any flashes or memories of stuff that don't seem to be what you expect, check them out, because they could be your body telling you, hey, something's happened here and we need to fix this. And I say the third part is something that I have to go back to you, Ina. If it wasn't for you, I don't think that I would be sitting here with you and talking, because finding the help and the guidance as we went through our 2 years with your research and being able to take the time and peeling those layers back like an onion, and to know that I could trust you and knew that it was never going to go anywhere unless we needed it to, and we had that bond from the very beginning, I started to open up. And it was your guidance that led me to realize that my mother was part of this whole process that I refused for my whole life to believe. And once those things started to unravel and start to piece together was when I started to find the help and started to find the healing methods for myself. And I want to say one last thing. I carried with me a lot of guilt to the fact that my teenage body responded during these stressful moments and when the abuse was happening. And I was constantly told that I must have liked it, that I wanted it because my body was reacting. And it had nothing to do with what was actually happening. And I want everyone to realize that that is not an indicator that you're gay, straight, bi, or whatever. It's stress. And someone is touching you, and it's natural. And it doesn't mean that you enjoyed it or that you wanted it. And I think that's the biggest part. And a lot of times we were told that if your body responds, you wanted it. So just take those moments and really reflect back on them. And I'm going to tell you that sometimes the scariest person is the person that was living with you the whole time and you trusted and you loved. And that's the hardest part to understand.
Thank you so much, Martin and John Michael, for that. And I would just like to add that in the research that I had done, there is actually a dedicated section to these answers. So by survivors, for survivors. And you can actually find this in the handout. And I'll just highlight a couple of things. I would like for survivors and victims to really challenge the self-blame, to remember that it is not their fault for the abuse and to place the responsibility where it truly lies, on the abuser, on the exploiter, and on the trafficker. It is not on the victim. As well, to be patient with yourself. Healing takes time. Celebrate your progress, no matter how small, and remember that you are not alone on this journey. And the last thing I want to highlight is to practice self-care and prioritize your well-being through activities that bring you joy. John Michael, would you like to add on to that as well on any words of advice for frontline service providers that are faced with female perpetrators?
Yes, there's a couple things I'd like to add. I think sometimes we are so conditioned that the mother figure is the safety and the protector and all this stuff. And yet in my case, my mother was the one who was basically setting me up to go with these professionals. And I don't think anybody would believe that. And I didn't believe it for such a long time. And it's easy to cover it up, especially with a female perpetrator and a male. Because we had an incident here in Ohio where a substitute teacher abused 3 male 16-year-olds and went to trial and everything. But right before the trial started, the parents wrote letters in defense of her because she made their sons men and celebrated, patted the boys on the back for having an older, very good-looking teacher. That's what our society is telling us, that it is okay, that it's not, there's nothing wrong with it. It's helping us move into manhood. It's a rite of passage. It's an initiation. And so it's all this kind of belief that we have. And what we forget, and I think a lot of people don't think about, is that the male mind does not fully mature until late 20s. And so these boys who were dealing with this were not able to understand what was going on. So they were talking about it at school. And it was the female students that overheard that went to the principal and reported. So it's kind of like this, what do we do? What are we about? They're celebrating on one side and yet they're trying to figure out what it means on another side. And another thing I just want to point out with trafficking, we always are looking for an older man, younger woman, or a younger girl in the trafficking scenarios, especially in these really high popular sporting events like the World Soccer Team, the Super Bowl, any type there's a sport. But I also want to let you know, as a trafficked boy, the people I was going to these events were older men, and everyone thought that they were our father or our uncle and never questioned twice. Just let us go by. Just let us go through. And I think what frontline people need to also realize is that you cannot treat a male victim like a female victim. That's another whole, you're treating me like a female. I shut down. I'm not giving you any information and I'm done. And so that's something else to think about. But those are like 3 things I think the frontline people need to understand. It is not easy. And I think what Martin said, it's different. It's unique. And we have to open our eyes to it. And we have to change our beliefs. And maybe seeing a person come in, maybe, putting that idea, is this an abuse case first, and then weed out from there, can also help immediate, because I'm so tired of like going to the doctor because I have something going on and they only give me a prescription that just helps the moment, like a headache or something, you know what I mean? When the actual problem is the long-term thing of what happened to me as a kid. And we're not looking at that. We're just looking for the immediate results and taking care of those immediate things.
So I would just like to add that the biases that we have against male survivors will also dismiss female victims as well that have been facing that as well. So let's go into the third question, which is, tell us about your work and anything that you would like to highlight. John Michael, would you like to begin?
Excuse me. I have been doing amazing things, thanks to you, for helping me realize who I am and what I'm about, and my voice is able to be heard. I've worked on a program called the Predatory Grooming Trifecta, which is basically coming out of the sports world. And when I have been working with the Nassar victims from U.S. gymnastics, is that this whole predatory grooming trifecta says that the predator will groom the institution of the sporting event first, then the parents, and then the child, which allows this predator to go undetected for years. And so that's kind of something that I've been working on. I've also been working recently on a thing called the Predatory Internet Grooming, or PIG, which is about this whole idea that, you know, the online predators, who are like 500,000 of them, are daily trying to connect with children and groom them and get them to send pictures and videos of explicit content to them so that they could go and sell it on Pornhubs. Then they come back to the person and ask for more. And when that person starts to refuse, they start to blackmail them and put them in really awkward situations, using threatening tactics, saying, I'm going to contact your parents, I'm going to let everyone know that you're doing this. And what I have learned, and this is what our society needs to learn too, and Martin, you said this not too long ago, males are easier to connect with, manipulate, and blackmail. And since they have a fear of reporting, predators are counting on them not to report. And so these lines and these numbers that we have of people saying that, you know, it's only females that are being approached online, it's because the girls are able to speak about it a little bit more, maybe because of the hashtag #WeToo movement, the NASA girls, the gymnasts who have come forward, and all this, you know, the Cosby situation. All these things have allowed them to speak up. Men are still being repressed. Even at the NASA situation, there were several male gymnasts that were never heard of or spoke about, because that would create something else. So I'm excited about doing that, and I'm looking for people who would be interested in working it with me or helping me compile more information. That's really cool. I'm also working as a certified trainer and coach with the Self-Talk Institute, and my goal was to help survivors, because we create our own lies to tell ourselves so that we can get through the incidences and get through our daily events. And these lies continue to grow as we grow, and they become very negative self-talk, basically. And if we're able to take where we are right now, and you can change the way you think and how you speak, you can change your life. And so I'm willing to help anybody with that. I'll be happy to give a free session, whatever like that. And the last thing I just wanted to share, and Michelle, you told me to do this, is to hold up my 2 books. These are the stories about my life that I wrote. One is Surface Tension, and the other is Cracked Surface. The Surface Tension is about my life through high school, when I was actually being groomed and when I was representing the United States at the World Championships. The Cracked Surface takes it a year later, where I was not getting the help that I needed, and I went on to college, and what happened in college due to the fact that I didn't know what was going on and I did not get the proper help. And there's a 3rd book that's coming out hopefully soon, and that will be about my Hollywood years and how I put myself right back into the abuse world and the scenes behind Hollywood. So thank you so much for letting me be able to share those with you.